they want to drive the bus a little bit more on their own education. And so even if the lights haven't come on too bright yet and the report cards aren't things that they love to show proudly, you know, there's still an openness and a desire to do better.
In this video, you'll meet Luke Coles, who's the principal of Blyth Academy Lawrence Park in Toronto. And in this video, you'll hear him talk about the relationship between his school and the larger Blyth Academy network. You'll also hear him talk about how the school gives independence to its high school students and lets them take ownership of their education. And you'll also hear him talk about how the school has grown manageably over its 10-year lifespan and how he hopes it will continue to grow afterwards. 3 things you love about your job.
Sure. I've been principal of the school from day one for 10 years. So I love the fact that I feel as invested as I do in this community that I've seen go from 20 students to 200 students and change as much as it has in its kind of demographic, its vibe, its feel, what we can offer. So I've loved the story would be one, the story of our rapid growth over the last 10 years. I love that I get to come to a work that feels very relationship based. Teachers with teachers, students with students, and maybe most importantly, students with teachers. We're a really close community. Everyone knows everyone. It feels very personal, which in this time, I think matters a lot, with a lot of kids feeling a bit unknown and unseen in their lives. And I guess the last is it's just a really positive place. There's not currently, but this building is usually packed and with a lot of laughter, a lot of good feeling. And I mean, who doesn't want to be around that? So I guess those would be my 3.
And just to clarify, you are the principal of Blyth Academy Lawrence Park, and that operates within the larger network of Blyth Academy schools.
You got it. Yes, we have 11 brick and mortar schools. We have an online school as well. But Blyth Academy Lawrence Park has been in our North Toronto community now for 10 years. We'll launch our 11th September to June cycle shortly. And each of our schools takes on a very unique personality, I would say, among our family of schools. We're a real sort of neighborhood school. Most of our students are close to us. They walk, they skateboard, they bike. Not all, but most. And that sort of allows us to create a place where kids aren't as likely to leave as soon as they're finished class. They'll stick around for the sports and the clubs and the spirit building stuff that I think kind of makes school what we want it to be.
Mm. And in general, why do parents gravitate towards Blyth Academy in general, and specifically, why would they come to Lawrence Park specifically?
Right. I mean, there's a long answer and a short, and I may not know the full answer, but my sense is that as we've grown over these last 10 years, the growing has been almost entirely as a result of word of mouth. Most families coming to us, and it's not always parent-led, it's often student-led, bringing their parents to us to learn a bit more about what we offer. Most will come and cite at least one relative or friend who has come here, and you know what we often hear is that they've been quite surprised by what they've experienced. You know, they came here for a reason. They might have come here for a quad semestered school to manage 2 at a time instead of 4 or 8 because they thought that might be less overwhelming. You know, they might have come here because they just simply thought it will be easier and they will do better. But that's not going to draw students. That's not going to excite parents and have them sort of commit to a still very youthful school. I think what they've heard and what the word of mouth is, man, this place is really engaging. I'm in a small class. I feel active, not passive. I feel like I'm a part of something in a classroom instead of a spectator just sort of soaking in the information. I'm actually helping to create the energy and the information and the learning. And so there's an engagement. And I'm not going to say every kid wakes up excited to come to school, but I think almost all of our students will be a little more excited, or at least a little more willing and kind of open to the school day here because of how personal it is.
In the 10 years that you've been at Blyth Academy Lawrence Park, You said that you've been proud of the growth that it
Yeah.
has achieved, but 200 students still is relatively small. So, what was that an intentional decision on your part to grow steadily and keep things manageable over the 10 years?
It was. I mean, our founder, who was owner until quite recently, Sam Blyth. I mean, his concept was for what he called boutique schools, and we're still growing. We're not capped at 200. We would happily grow probably another 50%. But I think there will come a point, and I don't know when exactly that is, but there will come a point where it will be hard to kind of maintain what we have now. The reality that, when a student walks through the front door, whoever the first adult they see is, that adult will call them by name and will in all likelihood be able to ask them about something specific to them. How was your game last night? How was your meet? How was your recital? So that personalized component, there is a cap.
Mm-hmm.
We're not there yet, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think that the focus has been on grow at all costs. It's been sort of grow the right way.
Right, right. And what initially drew you to the school 10 years ago?
Easy answer. So, I mean, I had 12 years before being at Blyth Academy at the Sterling Hall School, teacher and vice principal there at the end. And I loved it. I would say a more traditional, known, sought after kind of what some people like to call tier 1 school. And the draw of Blyth Academy 10 years ago was that it hadn't fully defined itself. And Sam, who I already mentioned, was an entrepreneurial owner. There was no lengthy process if you wanted to try something. In fact, I found out a few times that you had to be careful pitching an idea within the organization, because if the idea was well received, it would be acted upon like tomorrow. And you might not have been ready to bring it to life that fast. But so I love the possibilities. It just felt like, what an exciting opportunity to build a team. And I'll mention in a non-union environment, so if a teacher, which does sometimes happen, if a teacher who was once incredibly passionate and impactful becomes less so, this is a place where we can have a little bit of accountability built in, and we can say to the teacher, listen, we need to find that again, or we have to find it elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And what's an example of an idea that you had that was immediately taken up? And what were you
Sure.
excited to do at the school with that kind of freedom?
I could give you a couple. The first one was our model for school at Blyth Academy is that our students are taking 2 full-time classes at a time, quad semester, 2 for the 8. And I'm not going to get too deep here, but there are 3 periods in the day. And when we first opened, all of our students in grades 9, 10, 11, and 12 were in class for 2 of those 3 periods and not in class for 1 of the 3. And what we always hope and encourage students to do with that not in class period, with the spare, is get some exercise. We have a gym that we're attached to that they can go and work out at. There are volunteer opportunities to get. There are lots of spaces to set up and do homework. There are a lot of positive things, of course, that students can do at that time. We found out really early on here that for the most part, our grade 11 and 12 students were doing the things we hoped, and our grade 9 and 10 students weren't. They weren't doing anything terrible, but they just wouldn't leave. They weren't really ready for that amount of freedom. And we talked about one day in a sort of life skills concept that felt really dreamy to me at the time, like a program for the grade 9s and 10s that we could structure for the entire year with that period that they're not in class for, that could involve, things that I guess I would say schools should do and typically haven't done. Cooking classes and financial literacy work, and then some very practical things, maybe learning how to change oil in a car, or taking a dance class or 2, some Toastmasters stuff, some community service work, like just a lot of stuff that, again, wouldn't traditionally be done by schools. And anyway, we had a chat about what was really a concept, right? And it was on the website 48 hours later. And I actually learned about it on the website. And then, it was like, build the plane while you fly it, right? It was okay, all right, this is happening. And I don't know, I love that pressure. I would take that any day over, let's strike a committee and talk about it in a year. Let's
Hmm.
just do it. Let's do it. Let's try it. And if it doesn't work, I think that's a great thing for a school to be able to say, we've really tried something that we thought might work and it hasn't, and so we're not proceeding with it. But let's be the place that tries it.
Right. And do the students have that kind of freedom as well to have an idea, bring it to administration, and see what happens?
Totally. Well, I sure hope so. I think the evidence is that every year we have at least one club or team launch here that is a product of a student just saying we need it or we want it. We had a couple of we do draw sometimes. It's not our main demographic here, but every year we have a few elite athletes in the school who are just drawn to that flexible schedule so they can kind of build their training around us. And about year 3 for us, we had a triathlete, a national triathlete in the building, and we started a triathlon club that the student helped lead. And it just took a life on of its own. We now host the city's largest inter-school triathlon. Blyth Lawrence Park does. We do the cycle in a spin studio, so we don't need road closures and lots of equipment. It's a great event. We had about 16 schools participate last year, and that was totally student initiated.
And did that include other Blythe Academy schools?
Yeah, so we had last year a combination of, we had several of our campuses. We had independent schools, private schools, and public schools all represented. It was, which was actually one of the really neat things about it. Very few events have all sides of our many schooling options in Toronto, and we are together. Like there's often a sense that that there's competition, and that it's I would like to think that we're all together. I mean, we don't thrive on the public system struggling. I would certainly like to see all of our different forms of education do well.
Mm-hmm. On those lines, what's the relationship between Blythe Academy Lawrence Park and the rest of the Blythe Academy schools? How are you all working together and networking?
Yeah, no, we work closely together. There are significant differences between our schools. In some cases, even how the school is scheduled. We have some theme-based schools. Our Downsview Park campus, for example, is very sports-based. But we work closely together. It's really helpful to us to have those additional students in order to make certain events run. If you're going to host a Model United Nations symposium, we have sort of easy and immediate access to bring kids in if we've got an event worth the travel. Our prom it would be tough to do a prom with 85 graduating students at our campus. But when we combine 3 or 4 campuses, we can have a great event at the end of the year. And structurally, we have a chief academic officer who supports all of the principals. We meet very regularly to share ideas and resources. So it's very helpful.
You said that every school has its own unique personality within the family. What would you say that your school, what role does it play?
I'm obviously a bit biased. I feel like we've spearheaded a lot of the sort of student life, community side of what school ought to be here. We grew quickly, and we grew, as I said, sort of locally. So we had students who were more likely to stay put, more likely to make friends with other students who live close. That does help, I think, when it comes to community building in early years. If most of your students are close to each other. So I just feel like we've been more of a traditional school in a sense, even though we're not. We're innovative and different in lots of ways, but we have more of what people tend to associate with school than some of the campuses have historically. We are part of the Small School Athletic Federation, so we have several teams that, they're not world beaters necessarily, but they have tryouts and they compete in a season and occasionally qualify for playoffs. That's really fun for us. We've hosted a number of inter-school events, as I've already referenced. We've got some clubs that travel even internationally. Our Model UN and our DECA groups are competing locally and internationally. and we've just kept adding. I mean, this last year, our big initiative was environmental. We sort of turned a nothing roof of our building here on Yonge Street into a green roof. We've got birds and bees. We've got a beehive up there. We've got bird feeders. We've got a garden that our culinary club was making use of. We're just constantly adding, a like community vibe. And so I think that's become kind of our identity.
Is there a student that you think wouldn't excel at Blyth Academy Lawrence Park?
Yes, I do. And I say this in our admissions meetings all the time. Because we're personalized and our classes are small, and we really count on students to be active, right? We don't need them to come in and do much other than be open and present. And so it's the last one that is actually my real answer. We've really struggled with kids who are constantly late or absent. We're doing things in class. So when a family asks us to send home the work, I kind of like that often there really isn't much that can be sent home. Like something happened in class. There was a debate. There was an exploration into something. There was an activity. There was an outing. And so that's what I will always say. I mean, earlier this morning, I already said it to a prospective student. I mean, the one thing that I ask is in these few weeks before we begin, if you can be working on one thing inside yourself, it's just to really try and commit to be on time and to come every day. And if you're feeling anxious in the morning, bring your body into the building. We think we have some pretty amazing supports in place here. We're very open to rejigging things if we have to, but we can't bring our creativity and solutions oriented approach to a student who's not here. And I mean, I guess I would also add that we don't really offer applied level courses. So, our students are university or college bound. But we need a certain degree of, I'm into this.
Mm-hmm.
And we get an awful lot of it. We have a lot of students, we feel, who just they want to drive the bus a little bit more on their own education. And so even if the lights haven't come on too bright yet, and the report cards aren't things that they love to show proudly, there's still an openness and a desire to do better. And we're seeing this more and more, we actually see a lot of students who in fact do have a report card that shines bright, but they just feel like they would like to be a little more excited. Mm-hmm. Nothing necessarily, nothing's going wrong, doing really well, but I'm not loving it. Mm-hmm. And I think I'd like something more personal and more that's about me.
And do you feel like for the high school years, is that an important trait to instill in these years specifically? The idea of being present, of being proactive, of taking ownership of their time?
For sure. I mean, how could I say no to that, right? Like, it's so important. I mean, that's this scary statistic that 1 in 5 students now don't finish their first year of college or university. I mean, the only thing I can attribute that to is we're sending kids a year earlier than certainly when I went. And there's not a lot of accountability yet in some of those young people. And so they're signing on for a program that may not actually be something that they're excited in. It could be something that mom or dad or teacher A or guidance counselor B sort of said, this is where I think you should be. And they just kind of follow, they just go. And I mean, I think that's always been the case, but now they sort of know they have options, and this is good news for us. I think it's nice that students realize now that, pivoting after year 1 is not always a bad thing. In fact, a lot of the time it's a move towards passion, right? It's a move towards like real self. So if we can help them start to make that shift before they arrive post-secondary, I mean, that feels like meaningful work. That feels like some real impact there. I mean, we'll kind of jokingly warn families here that don't sign on for a cooking class or a photography class or a recreation leadership class here if you're not willing to that potentially become the direction that you now move in. because it happens, and it happens a lot. And we're in North Toronto, and in North Toronto, it's still, there are a few routes that I think a lot of our families kind of assume that their kids will ultimately land in. And I would love it if at the end of the day, our students have found a wider array of paths.
So it gives them the opportunity to discover passions earlier on that they didn't know that they had.
Yeah. And not just think about content. I mean, my experience of high school around the corner from here was like, I had a great time. I'm not, I had a nice time and nice teachers and made some good friends, but in terms of the actual education, it felt totally content based. I was nowhere in the mix. Like whatever this concept of self is, no part of my high school education. It was just like everyone else in the room, bring yourself into a room and play the game, right? Listen to what's said, write it down, memorize it, kind of regurgitate it. Okay, that's the game. And I think we're doing something much better now.
And what role do you see as parents playing in that, in allowing students to arrive and be present and take ownership of their education?
Well, this is where I think we have a huge advantage as a school. We're 10 years old. Nobody's grandparents went here. So the very fact that they're entrusting us and sort of investing in us, there's an openness to something new. I would like it, I would love to attach to that, brave, innovative, open, all these things that we want to be, flexible. So I think the parent has potentially a huge role to play, and plays a big role simply in kind of coming here and supporting the idea of something that was maybe unplanned earlier in the child's life. Most high schools around here are full of kids who were always going to go there. That was the predetermined school. Kids, I often see them, right? Kids, babies are in bibs with like the logo of the high school they're going to go to. And that's not likely for us yet because we're still young. So, what is the role of the parent beyond that? Well, we communicate a lot with parents. We keep them real-time informed on how their child is doing. I know from kids of my own, like it's a bit of a nightmare for a parent when you learn that your child is like 4 or 5 assignments behind. I mean, that sort of feels like time to wave the white flag, right? We can't, unless your child is super academic, catching up at that point is likely not going to happen. Whereas a message that, a very specific message that says, today this product was going to be turned in or was going to be presented. I saw 2 days ago that your child has made some progress, so this isn't something that hasn't been started. Was a little surprised, disappointed that it wasn't ready today. I mean, for a parent who's engaged, I mean, that's an opportunity, right? That's a gift. That allows the parent then to just, okay, you know what, tonight, whatever was planned is now unplanned. We're going to make this the priority. And so, I for most of our families, I feel like we have a really nice partnership between, student supports at home and supports here at school.
And how do you resolve parent conflicts? Say if there is a miscommunication or there is an issue that arrives, what's your strategy for resolving that?
I think it's important that we're willing to sometimes apologize. If we haven't followed through on our promise of communication. So if on that example I just gave you, if we are actually communicating that a child is 2 or 3 assignments behind and didn't communicate it when it was 1, there's a good reason for that sometimes. Maybe a teacher has had a conversation with the student and the student has actually asked that it not be communicated home, and the teacher makes the decision. I'm going to give this student what they're asking for in hopes that this might, bring about a little more accountability, a little more action, and then it fails. But so I think a willingness to apologize goes an awfully long way, because it's tough, right? Like it's a lot of students, it's a lot of interactions and communications, and everyone's busy, and sometimes when there's a conflict, as you're describing, sometimes a parent presents where they're at, and we sympathize completely. But I mean, I don't think we have a lot of that. And we don't have a lot of that because I think it's a very open exchange. Parents are parents are reaching out all the time because they're getting an email at least weekly from each of the two teachers working with their student at any given time. And even if the email is just simply to say, this is what we've been doing this week, this is what I'm kind of hoping the kids are thinking about or working on over the weekend, it's an easy opportunity to click reply and say, I haven't noticed my son doing anything for the last little while. Everything okay? Is he on top of his work? And we'll get back to them within 24 hours every time.
Right. We talked about growing and expanding, but what do you see for Blyth Academy Lawrence Park within the next 5 or 10 years in terms of goals and priorities?
Yeah, well, much of the same of what's been happening, right? I would like to see us keep growing in size. We still have a relatively small grade 9 and 10 cohort, and we feel we do grade 9 and 10 really well with that Life Skills Foundations program that I talked about. And so it's a matter of, I'm just hoping that as more people in our community learn more about us and understand that we are not a place to just come and fill in gaps, but we are in fact the full experience of high school in a really varied and fun way. I will hope that over the next 5 or 10 years, the cohort balances a little bit, that we have a larger 9-10 class than we currently do. But I'm really proud of the level of academics right now. Our teachers are teachers are the most important people in the building, and I think we have an incredible faculty. They only teach what they love. We don't ask the English teacher to teach photography, right? We make sure that people are teaching what they're passionate about. So more of that. It would be interesting to us. We've explored it in the past, and due to COVID, we put it on the back burner. But we've explored adding grade 7 and 8, a middle school, to us, and I love that idea down the road. But yeah, just sort of continuing on the tangent we've been on.
And so the 9-10 years are smaller than the grade 11 and 12 years. What can you explain that difference? Why do students come to you later on in the high school years?
Sure. Well, I think it's because in our neighborhood, there really is an attachment to a predetermined high school for most families. Most families aren't new to North Toronto. And so most families will have a parent who went to a school around here. And we tend to be tied. Most of us have good experiences in high school. Even if they're not great, they're good. And it's nice to think of kids following in footsteps. So because we're not that predetermined path as a very young school, I just don't think we're seeing yet as many grade 9s and 10s as we would maybe like to. We're seeing more every year. There were years there where we had under 10 combined in grade 9 and 10, and last year I think we had about 35 combined in those two grades. But as time passes and as word keeps spreading, again, I think it's all word of mouth for us. I just assume that we'll keep growing.
Right. And do you have advice for parents who are in the middle of their school search right now?
Just go. Don't let a visit to a school be a visit to a website. Go. And now is not the time, in a way, because there's not a lot of bodies in buildings, but ideally when touring, if we're talking about regular times when we're all out in the world seeing one another, I mean, if you can, have conversations while you are touring with more than the person who's been assigned to the tour. And I would say too, just pay attention to how you feel. Most of all, how your child feels, if you're at the point where you're ready to bring them. We like to, I don't know, I sort of feel like when a child, especially when a prospective student comes here and has the experience of walking around the building and meeting some teachers, and we often have them spend part of the day in class with, paired up with a couple of students, they do typically land because they just it's a refreshing feel. Our school is bright and modern and cheerful. And they just like the feel. So I guess that's my advice is be as open as you can. I was recently at a talk, and heard it was sort of a parenting network presentation, and I really liked what the presenter said about parenting in general. They said our job as parents is to watch, right? To watch our children and to try and understand what the person is, who the person is that they are kind of meant to become. And as we start to get clues into that, support it, as opposed to what maybe some of us default to as parents, which is having a preconceived idea of who our kid could be, should be, will be, and pushing that agenda, right? It's like watching. So so I would say bring your child to a few different options, and we are different. We're not one of the traditional independent schools. We're certainly not a traditional TDSB school. We like those both. We're not here to say that there are problems with those. I just think it's nice to have something that's neither one nor the other in the mix. Come for a tour, see how it feels.
And with your knowledge of education, both public, independent schools, is there something that you would, is there a red flag that you would be aware of, or would ring alarm bells in your head if you were in a parent's position looking at options?
I don't know if I'd say there's a red flag. I mean, it so much depends upon the child, right? And I mean, there are kids who will thrive in almost any school system. And there are an awful lot of kids who will have a very different experience and I think get closer to that person that they were maybe meant to be if they can find a better fit. I mean, a red flag for me, I guess, is just a school that feels like it's telling you before they've met your child what they're going to do with that child and who that child is going to become. That's currently, I guess, where I'm at in my career and life and all that. That to me is a real red flag. Even some schools with mission statements that will sort of announce, give us your child, this is what we're going to turn them into. Well, that may not be my child, right? And that would be my red flag. I hope we're saying we certainly feel the opposite here. We want to meet the child. Most who we meet, we feel we can be a good fit for. And then when the student lands here, it becomes just this, however long we have them, whether it's 1 year or 4 years, it's just constantly, we hope, getting to know them better. And more importantly for them, getting them to know themselves better.
And if Blyth Academy Lawrence Park was a person, what personality traits would it have?
I like that. I think it would be nothing to do with age. I think it would be youthful, fun, good company, open. It would be someone who listens, like really listens, who's interested in not just talking about themselves, but in learning more about you. So I think it'd be a really cool person. Actually, it would be someone who'd be nice to have as a friend, and be one of those friends who, when you spend time with them, you kind of feel like this person's good for me. That's a healthy friend.